top 10 musical compositions that don't have any sound at all. Sound is arguably the most important aspect of music. The Oxford English Dictionary defines music as the art or science of blending vocal or instrumental sounds to achieve beauty of shape, harmony, etc. People may recall brief melodically pleasant tunes from their childhood that soothe them when they think of music. They can conjure up ideas of annoying overplayed earworms that they constantly hear on the radio. They may even regard avant-garde non-melodic experimentation to be musical creations. But what happens when musicians compose or perform music that is completely silent? What is the most effective technique to make sense of these shards? To address this question, we've compiled a list of 11 silent musical pieces along with reasons why their silence adds aesthetic or historical value. Number 10. John Cage 4 feet 33. John Cage, an avant-garde composer, created 4 feet 33, possibly the most famous silent composition, in 1952. When David Tudor performed the piece for the first time on August 29 that year, the transitions between the three movements were marked by the opening and closing of a piano lid. The duration of the performance was measured using a stopwatch. Many people were perplexed when, much to no one's surprise, a piece of music that was supposed to be melodious was performed without sound. On the other side, Cage was serious about his goals. After visiting Harvard's anechoic box in 1950, he discovered that there is no such thing as true silence. As a result, he decided to show his audience that the sounds they were experiencing in their everyday lives were music. The composer remarked, "Music is continuous. We're the only ones who refuse to look." Number 9. John Denver, The Ballad of Richard Nixon. One of John Denver's major goals, according to the songwriter, is nuclear disarmament. President Richard Nixon considered using nuclear weapons 4 times during his term. Denver planned to cut back on defense spending. Nixon wished to raise it. It's logical to presume the two gentlemen had a few political squabbles. On his 1964 album Rhymes and Reasons, Denver addressed his feelings about Nixon's presidency twice. He wrote The Ballad of Spiro Agnew, a song about Nixon's vice president that is entirely made up of the words, "I'll sing you a song on Spiro Agnew and all the horrors he's committed." Denver couldn't think of anything positive to say about Agnew, and his somber song about Nixon demonstrates that. Who knows what he might have done if it hadn't been for Watergate. Number 8. Soulfly, the 11th of September 01. We'll now move on to a more serious subject. Soulfly, an American metal band, released their third album on June 25, 2002, just over a year after the horrific terrorist attacks on September 11, 2001. Soulfly dedicated a minute of silence for their first release since the attacks to all those who were affected. The United States has observed 6 minutes of silence to commemorate the attacks, all of which coincide to the exact times when the 4 planes crashed across the country and the World Trade Center's North and South Towers collapsed. This piece can be used as a form of sorrow at periods of silence, and it is hoped that it will inspire people to remember such moments on their own terms. Number 7. Vulfpeckz Z. There are 10 Vulfpeckz tracks on this list, but this is the first one, Sleepify, a compilation of 10 30-second snippets of complete silence from which they all came. Vulfpeckz's plan was to get people to stream the record, collect enough money to fund a tour, and make it completely free to attend. Isn't it straightforward? It turns out to be true. Spotify took a month to take the record down, and in the meanwhile they responded by calling the piece John Cage inspired. The band made a total of $20,000 through streaming, which they used to fund the Sleepify tour. Not bad for the world's most silent record, as they put it. Number 6. Taylor Swift Track 3. At this point, it's impossible for a household celebrity like Taylor Swift to not break chart records. Despite only announcing the album the day before its release, the physical edition of Folklore sold over 1.3 million copies, and the digital edition busted streaming records on Spotify, Apple Music, and Amazon Music. It's no wonder then that any Swift release will be discussed, even if it's a complete disaster. In October 2014, just days before her synth-pop album 1989 was released, iTunes released a song called Track 3. Swifties were overjoyed to receive the music only to discover, for 8 seconds it was nothing but silence. Despite this, it soon soared to the top of the Canadian iTunes charts before being taken down. It just goes to show that enthusiastic fans will take everything they can get. Number 5. Brett Black's Silence 5 Seconds. This is the first track on Brett Black's Holy Silent album, Silent Tracks of various useful lengths. The album is claimed as the first commercially released silence album in the world. When Black awakened one morning, he claims he heard a catchy piece of silent music in his head and decided to write the album. With the album, he said he wanted to push silence to new extremities, citing John Cage and French mime Marcel Marceau as influences. Coldplay, he believes, will be interested in performing the compositions in the future. Number 4. John Lennon Nutopian International Anthem. On April 1, 1973, legendary Beatle John Lennon and his wife Yoko Ono staged a news conference to announce the foundation of a new nation, despite being threatened with expulsion from the United States owing to a marijuana charge. Nutopia was a made-up country with no boundaries or laws, just people. They applied to the UN for diplomatic protection and status as ambassadors of the country, giving their location as 1 White Street in Tribeca. On his 1973 album Mind Games, John Lennon included a 5-second silent track titled Nutopian International Anthem, indicating his actual goal of having just humans in his civilization. Number 3. Yves Klein Monotone Silence Symphony. This item is slightly misleading because Yves Klein's symphonic piece does not contain full silence. It begins with a 20-minute continuous play of a single D major chord followed by a 20-minute silence. Klein produced this piece in the 1940s, claiming that it depicted how he wanted his own life to be. In 1960, 10 musicians took part in the only known performance of the symphony during Klein's lifetime. A performance of the piece in New York in 2013 featured 70 musicians and singers, bringing Klein's dreams to reality more than 5 decades later. If only he could see the results of his work right now. Number 2. Raymond Scott Silent Music. In 1941, Time magazine included an article on a 13-piece orchestra that gave a unique performance for their audience. The pianist lightly touched the keys and the brass and woodwind instruments mimed playing, but the stage was devoid of sound. To bandleader Raymond Scott, this was soothing music. Scott's decision to perform this work in quiet remains a mystery. It could have been either a sardonic comment on effort and failure or designed for hilarious effect, according to Julian Dodd, a music philosopher. Regardless, the audience appeared befuddled throughout the show. They were amused by the show and chuckled. It was just striking enough to make listeners wonder if other bands' quiet would sound better than Scott's. The Time writer adds. Number 1. Stiff records the wit and wisdom of Ronald Reagan. Another politically charged release completes today's silent musical offerings. Someone had a grudge against Ronald Reagan, much like John Denver had a hatred against Richard Nixon. Rather than a song, the wit and wisdom of Ronald Reagan was an entirely silent album released by Stiff Records. There were grooves on the record that could be played, but there was no music on it. According to the BBC, it was intended to be a sardonic alternative to more traditional protest songs. Despite its silence, the record appears to have been a success since it sold over 30,000 copies during its initial run. It's sometimes astounding what people will buy.